Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. I am your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very, very senior executive and leadership coach, Mr. JP Singh. JP, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh.
JP, as I mentioned, is a senior executive and leadership coach, and he's the former managing director of Bosch and Lomb. So, JP, since 2008, you have focused on, and to quote you, co-evolution, co-creation, and facilitation in the execution of highly focused, distilled, and clear thoughts, insights, and action plans with measurable results, return on investment. Let's start with you explaining to me and to our viewers and listeners what you mean, and give us an example if you can.
Sure. So, Ashutosh, you've picked up the most key message out of my entire profile.
Mm-hmm.
I'm delighted that my positioning statement is hitting the right people.
Correct. Okay.
Okay. So, my philosophy has been always to co-create, work with people.
Right.
Not just when I started as a coach, but I believe results are better when you have people together. So it's not between the coachee or the leader follower.
Mm-hmm.
It's also between stakeholders. So I've been always using this co-creation, evolving with people.
Mm-hmm.
I have a formula. Performance is equal to idea into acceptance.
Okay.
So you may have the best idea, but if acceptance is zero, then performance is going to be zero.
Correct.
So therefore, I adopted always this philosophy of co-evolving and co-creation.
Mm-hmm.
And so even when I was working as an executive, I would get teams together and help build these things. My philosophy got further strengthened, when I was, studying Vedanta. I came across these 3 C's of success in this world.
Mm-hmm.
They are concentration, consistency, and collaboration.
Okay.
Or cooperation.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at natural ecosystems,
mm-hmm.
the history of evolution is a history of collaboration, not of combat.
Mm-hmm.
So you have, gene pool sharing, and you have symbiotic coexistence.
Mm-hmm.
So also in organizations which are ecosystems, the best form of evolution is co-creation, co-sharing, and everyone in the organization has the information.
Okay.
When you start solving problems, as reinforced in the coaching process later on, the belief is that the coachee has all the solutions.
Correct.
So also in an organization, so why not bring the best ideas of everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Let everyone put solutions on the table and cull out the most insightful solution that is accepted by all.
Okay. Very interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
That's the kind of philosophy that led me to it.
Very, very interesting. So I'm sure we'll talk a little more about it as we talk about the other questions that I have. But after a successful corporate career, what was the motivation to become a coach?
Okay, so these two are actually a bit linked. My personality, whenever I did a psychographics or psychometric test, right, it came up as more of collaborative, a sense of belonging. So my leadership style was also like that always. And I was somewhere getting a bit disillusioned by the kind of leadership that we see and practice. And I'm guilty of that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Ordering, pushing, do it. And I sat and thought to myself, is this the kind of leadership is this the way I want to lead my life for the balance part of my journey? And I did a little bit of reflection on my own. And I said, I do mission statements and vision statements for my teams and organizations. What about myself? And that reflection led me to say that, if end of it, the purpose is to serve, to help people. And the more I thought and reflected, the more I polished that kind of mission for myself. So I coined it as to help organizations and individuals in realizing their potential, but not through ordering and pushing and instructing, but by hand-holding and facilitation.
Very interesting.
And that's where I said, if that's the case, then let me do something where I can broaden my scope and help everyone. So it was more of a purpose-led call that made me shift to being on my own. But coaching was not fully, established at that point in time. This was 10, 12 years back. So I said, what should I call myself? I didn't know there was a thing called professional coaching so much. So I said, the only word that comes to mind is helper. So in the absence of anything, I said, okay, let's start with consulting. And that's, as I went along, I came across this term called professional coaching, and I realized that was bang on, with my mission. And that's how I, gradually moved into this realm.
Wonderful. So, that takes me to my next question that, 42, 43 years ago, when I was 21 and joined ITC, coaching or mentoring was done either by a family elder or by a senior manager or someone senior to you who took a liking to you. What has changed in the last 2 or 3 decades that today people are willing to pay to be coached?
Yeah. Very often when I reflect on this, I go back to Indian culture. You're rightly saying, we were coached by family members and elders. And, the first and the most impressive coach I know of is Krishna.
Absolutely right.
And we have a tradition of Guru Shishya Parampara, and Ram had a coach, Krishna had a coach, Vashisht. Ram had a coach, and Shivaji, and so many others. All our kings had gurus, and
correct.
So this tradition has been on for a very, very long time. Over the last 20, 25 years, 30 years, I was told to have a coach some 20 years back by my HR, and he said, "What, coach me? JP Singh doesn't need a coach." But what happens is that things have become a little more complex these days. So, and most of the executives I coach or work with are, they're into firefighting all the time. So sometimes you need time to step back and look at yourself from outside. There's a thing called self-coaching. If I'm evolved enough, I can ask myself the right questions and reflect. And so you don't need a coach actually in that case. But the issue is, I think that the time to self-reflect and detach, again, what Krishna calls Sakshi Bhav, to move back away, to look at yourself from outside and find your answers. Sometimes you don't get those, and we need someone to help us throw light on these issues in a detached, unbiased manner.
Very interesting. So, when I was reading about you, one of the things that you have developed is leading through coaching. Help me understand what you do in this process.
So, as I said earlier, my inherent style itself is of a sense of belonging and feeling and cooperation and collaboration. So whenever I led people, I was never of the belief of, what they call leader follower now. I would take them along and help people, even in the most critical situations. I believe that sometimes in crisis, we tend to rush forward. But also what happens is one mistake I do get multiplied by 100 followers. So if I involve people and take their views and help them come up with solutions, that's where the most optimal solutions and most acceptable and motivated actions come up. So to give you an example, what comes to mind is we had inherited a business which was not making money. And so one way was, give a diktat as the head of the business or entity to cut down costs here, do this, So what we did was we got all functional heads into the room and said, this is the situation. We survive or we don't, and we're all in it together. So what do you feel is the actions we could take? No diktat. So everyone came up with their own action points, put it on the table. And, in their own solutions, in their own answers, they came up with action points which are totally motivated. Within 1 year, we had costs cutting down, about 7 to 8% float down straight to the bottom line. And then we could, a year, 2 years later, then had to move on to organic growth because the P&L was okay now. And yet again, the direction to take, what vision and purpose now to set for the organization was what I got them all together and created, 5 key strategic issues that we needed to address and prioritize them. So at every stage, I believe that, if I lead through co-evolution and co-creation, the action steps can be very measurable and motivated. So that's what I, summed up as leading through coaching rather than instructions at all.
Wonderful. So my next question to you is that from the perspective of a coachee, how do they determine that I have a good coach?
Yeah. I firmly believe that before selection of the coach, it's a very important process.
Correct.
That's one. And then subsequently to, finally say, okay, yeah, I had a good coach. To start with, the practice that is followed is looking at a chemistry call. But even in earlier days in Indian philosophy, you had a guru, you selected a guru, a lot of time was taken in identifying each other, compatibility, respect.
Correct.
What was called, again, can't be replicated today. Shraddha. There's no word in English for Shraddha. So that faith, loosely translated, in the coach, mutual respect. So in that chemistry call, what the coachee tries to do is identify whether they can, work with the coach. Is there compatibility? Is there other vibes? Because, functional skills are only a base condition. Functional knowledge. You may have been a very senior executive, but that's history. Is the coach demonstrating self-awareness, first of all? Is the coach demonstrating self-management? Is the coach emotionally intelligent? Can be detached? So the coachee should try to assess these. Apart from skills, the good listener should ask,
Very interesting. Okay.
But subsequently, having done it, the first call that comes before we do any pre-post tests is a call within the coachee, and he says, I think I've changed. Before any ECGs and X-rays are done to figure out what change has happened.
Yeah.
The coachee registers within himself or herself.
Fascinating. So let me now move to the new generation of young people who has now entered the workforce, the millennials and the Gen Zs. Millennials are in their mid-30s, the Gen Zs are in their mid-20s. My first question to you is, what is your view in terms of coaching a lot of these young people, because their thinking processes are probably very different from the people who are in their mid-40s or mid-50s?
millennials they're seen to be, irreverent and, but what I see is they're very aspirational. They are very conscious of growth. They do not look at authority. And authority as in forced authority. So they're very agile, the minds, digital natives. They're very adaptive to thoughts. And so my belief and experience, and even experience, is that this process is the best suited for millennials. Maybe more suited than for 40s and 50-year-olds. Because millennials don't like to be told. And I've seen millennials respond so beautifully to reflect. Provided, obviously, you are, the millennial is not willing to take authority. So if you are able to, get them a feel that they're comfortable, it's a safe space to reflect. I've seen millennials respond, in a way that they'll reflect and visualize metaphors that like no one else can. A 22-year-old was, brilliant in within 2 sessions to crack. He was describing something as an obstacle, and then I said, "What is the obstacle?" He described a wall, and I said, "What kind of a wall is it?" And he came up with, and he said, "Oh, sir, I've got it." So these are people, I think the coaching process was meant for them. But actually, I've heard that in certain Western countries and more developed countries, the millennials are actually asking for coaching as a part of the joining package. So it's a great acceptance, great sign. They're negotiating coaching as a part of their, CDC.
Okay. And a follow-up question for that would be that how do you think the young people, the millennials and the Gen Zs, are strengthening the workplace, and what vulnerabilities do they bring with them?
See, I think very clearly they're bringing in adaptability, new ideas, very high execution orientation. And therefore, if channelized well, if the energy flow is channelized well, they can be assets.
Correct.
The thing is that with the current age and with so much exposure to so much information, there is this sense of instant gratification. So this feeling that everything should happen. So they are more about results than process. So that's the thing that I think we need to be aware of, and even the millennials, I think, are aware of it. Okay. But we can't tell them because they are aspirational. So if we need to channelize, it has to be done in the right way. So instead of instant gratification, if they can understand there are no shortcuts and it may take time, I think it's a explosive combination.
Wonderful. So JP, I'm now going to move to the next segment of our conversation. Our viewers and listeners love to get to know our guest a little better. So I have a few questions for you personally. My first question is that in a successful career that you have had, what would you say are 3 key milestones or pivot points?
Okay. I think various learnings, in a journey of life, you can't essentially pinpoint anything specific, but every stage, for example, the first was my working with an organization called Lakme. It was a Tata organization, and that was a great lesson in culture, teamwork, professionalism. And that transition from, and Lakme was a very comfortable, nice place to work for. Very professional, but very nice. And not that the other places I went to were not nice and comfortable, but a shift in cultures. And that nuance, if you pick up, it gives you a hell of a lot of wealth. My second organization, and that shift took me to India Today, Living Media. So one was an exposure to a very different set of products, applications. Subscription was just being launched with Business Today then. So an exposure to the annuity model. Music today was launched. So a very different set of product categories and culture, professional journalism.
Correct.
So the nuances are very different and enriches your experience and thought process. And the next was when I moved to Bosch and Lomb. It was a startup and a multinational. So an Indian Tata kind of culture, an Indian journalist culture, and a multinational in startup. Except for Ray-Ban, we were not market leaders unlike India Today and Acme. So to set up a business like contact lenses, which is a very new concept. So these three, and then like I shared with you, when I moved into coaching, when that mindset shift started happening, from, I guess it took me a 5-year journey from 2006 to 11, was a big shift for me to move into my own passion called coaching.
Nice, very nice. So JP, I have time for 2 more questions, and I was trying to decide what to ask, but I'm going to ask the next question is going to be on failure. I had a new book that came out in March on failure, and I've often said that parents in India, South Asia, Southeast Asia, don't teach children it's okay to fail. We're always told come first in class, go to the head of the line, and all these manifest itself in our behavior patterns. Yet we fail, we learn. My question to you is, what have been some of your learnings from some of your mistakes?
Bang on. We were always introduced to our relatives and friends who came home as, oh, it's a class mein first aata hai mission. Always scoring 80% for those days, 99.9% these days.
Correct.
Yeah, so, I was also one of those who had not faced failure. So rejection for a promotion, for example, was just not accepted. And then I reflect later on that, if I was standing first in class always, or second or third, whatever, how can I not be promoted? And on reflection later on, one realizes that, it was good for me not to be promoted then, because there were certain other skills I had to learn. And to move into that role a year or 2 years later, because otherwise you are set up for failure in any case. So rather than seeing that as a failure, not then, because I was never taught to accept failure, later on realized that, these are 1 year, 2 years, 3 years here and there are not losses in a lifespan. These are just, sometimes you catch up on the race and sometimes someone else catches up on the race. Simon Sinek wrote a beautiful book called Infinite Game. So it's a journey that continues.
Wonderful. And JP, my last question to you, and this is for the many, many people who will listen to our conversation. What would your advice be to a young individual starting off on her or his journey in the corporate world?
One would be very clearly, there are no shortcuts. Do the right thing, do the right action. Whether it was Krishna who said, do your karma, or today's world that we see every day, greed definitely leads to some rash decisions or, wrong actions. Things will come on their own. Like the story about caterpillar, it has to fight the shell on its own to become strong. It takes time. So never ever to take a wrong action. We've seen, business stories are replete with, in the last 2-3 decades, full of stories of greed that led to something. So do the right thing. And, going back to the age-old school, in school we were told to narrate, these quotations. One that comes back to me again and again now is, if wealth is lost, nothing is lost. If health is lost, definitely something is lost. And if character is lost, everything is lost. Last, to 2 years, last 2-3 decades, they've just told me the same thing again. A very simple learning.
Wonderful. Wonderful. JP, thank you so much. It's been such a
Thank you so much,
pleasure
Ashutosh.
speaking to you. Thank you for talking to me on so many different aspects of coaching.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh.
Yeah,
Pleasure
wonderful.
always.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.